Hi everyone, welcome to the second webinar of a series of webinars conducted by TCS in lieu of the upcoming strategic case study exams happening in August 2022. My name is Nick and I'm the lead tutor and evaluator for SCS at TCS. So before we start today's session, let me talk about what we discussed in webinar number 1. The recorded version of the webinar has already been uploaded onto our website. So if you missed out on the first webinar, you can check out the recorded version of it by visiting the website www.studyatTCS.com. So in the first webinar, I highlighted the technical nitty-gritties pertaining to the SCS exam. And on top of that, in the latter part of the first webinar, I provided an 8-week study plan as well. So hope you guys are sticking to that study plan. If you do stick to that study plan, closer to the exam, your workload would significantly decrease and it will be extremely beneficial for you because you can get rid of unnecessary exam stress, because most students they prepare themselves a week or two before the exam. So rather than doing that, it's prudent for you to stick to our 8-week study plan. Then closer to the exam, you'd have a very less amount of work to do when it comes to preparing, and you can get rid of unnecessary stress. So having said that, let's try to figure out what I'm going to discuss in today's webinar. So the session outcomes are, I'm going to highlight about answering technique or answer planning technique, because you need to have a good understanding about answering technique, especially when facing a time pressured exam such as SCS. And on top of that, I will be also talking about how to manage your time. As I highlighted earlier, SCS is an extremely time pressured exam, so you need to have an understanding about how to manage your time appropriately. Most students run out of time, and because of that end up failing the SCS exam. So rather than failing, it's prudent for you to manage your time appropriately. So I'll be highlighting what you need to do with regards to time management. And at the very end, I will be discussing the question and answer of one of our mini mocks and suggested based on the suggested answers. So what I'm going to do is, I will be, as I highlighted earlier, I'll be talking about answering technique and time management technique. And I will be practically showing to you guys how to apply this answering and time management technique when discussing the mini mock based on the suggested answer. Okay, so first things first, let's look at the first part of today's webinar, which is about answering technique. So when providing answers at the SCS exam, you need to adhere to these guidelines, because this is as per or in line with the requirements stipulated by the examiner. I'm going to highlight these points in the next webinar, webinar 3, which is happening next week, next Saturday. So you need to adhere to the guidelines provided by the examiner. So as per the examiner, when providing answers, you are supposed to use appropriate headings and subheadings. So you'd understand about this better when we are discussing the mini mock. So when developing headings and subheadings, what are you supposed to do? So when every time you are providing an answer for a subtask, you need to come up with a heading. And if you feel that you need to further subdivide the answer into certain parts, then you are more than welcome to use subheadings. So for each subtask, you are supposed to use a heading. And if you want to further subdivide the answer, then you are supposed to use subheadings. And there is a formatting which you need to adhere to when developing headings and subheadings. Headings need to be in bold and underlined format, and subheadings need to be in bold format. So let me repeat that once more. Headings need to be in bold and underlined format, and subheadings need to be in bold format. So why are you supposed to use headings and subheadings? Because if you do, then you are adhering to an appropriate structure, and this structure helps the invigilator when it comes to marking your paper. So the invigilator can clearly see how you had structured your answer. When the invigilator can clearly see this, can clearly see your structure, then he or she finds it extremely easy to allocate marks. So your objective at the exam should be to satisfy the invigilator. So if you are to satisfy the invigilator, first things first, you need to use headings and subheadings appropriately. And on top of that, when providing answers, you are supposed to provide answers in paragraphs. You'd see this when I'm taking you through the mini mock. Whenever I'm providing an answer, I've used paragraphs. You are not supposed to use bullet points or single lined sentences. The examiner specifically mentions that whenever you are providing answers at a case study examination, you are supposed to provide answers in paragraphs. So for instance, for each answer point, you need to come up with a paragraph, and a paragraph needs to have 2 to 4 sentences. Okay, so for instance, if you have 9 answer points in a certain subtask, then you need to have 9 paragraphs. Okay, so for each answer point, you need to come up with a paragraph. So if you have 9 answer points under a certain subtask, then you need to have 9 paragraphs in your answer. Okay, and looking at the word limit, ideally you need to have 950 to 1000 words per 60-minute task. So this is not a hard and fast rule. In why I've highlighted this is to give you an indication about the length of answers, because as students you might not be too conversant about the length of answers. So just to have a basic idea about it, it's better every time you practice your mocks, just try to figure out whether per task your word count comes up to somewhere around 950 to 1000. Even if it's lesser, even if your word count is lesser than this or higher than this, you need not worry too much about it, because the examiner is actually not, when allocating marks, the examiner is actually not looking at the word count. Instead, the examiner is looking at the quality of your answer. However, when practicing, it's good to see whether you are adhering to the required quantity of words. So try to figure out whether on a per task basis you are adhering to this guideline, thereby ideally having a word count of 950 to 1000 words per 60-minute task. So if you had done your OCS and MCS exams, you would have seen that a typical task carries a time allocation of 45 minutes. But at SCS, there are only 3 tasks per paper. So each task carries a time allocation of 60 minutes. So the time allocation is not 45 minutes per task. At the SCS level, the time allocation is 60 minutes per task. And when developing answers, you are supposed to allocate 1/3 of your time for reading and planning, and 2/3 of your time towards typing. So I've seen so many students out there, right after reading the requirement, they start typing the answer. And halfway through the answer, they figure out that they are not sticking to the requirement stipulated in the task, or they are providing a wrong answer, or they are headed in the wrong direction. So in such a context, these students end up deleting the answer which they had typed already, and they panic, they run out of time, because they have to go back to square one and start retyping the answer. So in order to avoid something like this, what I'm suggesting is, when developing answers, don't start typing the answer, fully fledged answer right away. Instead, spend 1/3 of your time to plan the answer, and the remaining time could be allocated towards typing the answer. So out of the 60 minutes at your disposal, 1/3 of the time, 20 minutes should be allocated towards reading and planning the answer, or in other terms, reading and coming up with an answer plan. For that, you are supposed to allocate 20 minutes. Then once you had structured your answer, once you had come up with a plan, answer plan, then the remaining 40 minutes can be utilized towards typing the answer. So I will be talking about how to do this in a practical manner when I'm discussing the mini mock and the suggested answer. Okay, so simply remember for now that 20 minutes should be allocated towards reading the question and coming up with an answer plan, and 40 minutes, the remaining 40 minutes can be utilized to type your answers. And the expected typing speed is a minimum of 20 words per minute. If your typing speed is not up to standard, you need to improve it, because or else you won't be able to complete your task on time, complete the answer on time. So what you can do is, there are so many software and platforms out there, or games, actually speaking, which you can utilize to improve your typing speeds. So just use the services provided by Google or some other provider to improve your typing speed before the exam. And when looking at mark allocations and time allocations, there are weightages provided at the end of each subtask. You'd understand what I'm talking about when I'm taking you through a mini mock. Okay, so as you can see in here, there are weightages provided 60% and 40%. So this gives you an indication about the mark allocation. So by looking at these weightages, you can determine how many marks are allocated for each subtask. And based on the mark allocations, when developing answer plans, you can determine how many points you are supposed to write. So usually you would get 2 or 3 marks per answer point. So if you are allocated 10 marks, then that means that you need to come up with at least 5 answer points. So 5 answer points into 2 marks each makes up your 10 marks. I'll be talking about this later on as well when I'm discussing the mini mock. So please be mindful about the weightages provided, because based on that you can determine how much of marks are allocated for each and every subtask, because based on these mark allocations you need to develop your answer points. Okay, and you are not supposed to spend time on formatting. Don't be too worried about paragraph alignment and whatnot, because you won't be getting any marks for these things. Okay, and when providing answers, remember, it's always about the quality of the points. It's not about the quantity. Just because you provide an extremely lengthy answer, it does not mean that you are going to get marks. You would only get marks if you have addressed the needs of the requirement appropriately. You would only get marks if you had come up with a high quality answer. Okay, so the examiner, when allocating marks, picks quality over quantity. Okay, so that's what you need to remember about answering techniques. And let's try to figure out what you need to do, or the steps you need to adhere to when developing answers. Okay, so first things first, you are supposed to read the scenario. So read the provided question, and there will be some reference material as well. So you need to read the question as well as the reference material to identify the content of the scenario. So after doing that, you are supposed to plot the requirements into headings and subheadings. So I said, based on for each and every subtask, you are supposed to come up with a heading. And if you want to further subdivide your answer, then you are supposed to come up with subheadings. So that's up to you. For each task, you must come up with a heading. And if you want to further subdivide your answer, you can come up with a subheading. So you are, after reading the scenario, you are supposed to plot the requirements into headings and subheadings. Once you have your headings and subheadings, invest time to understand the requirement clearly. So rather than, straight away typing your answer, spend some time to ponder about what the exact requirement of the task is. So you would see when you are doing your mock exams, you would see under a certain subtask, there could be 2 or 3 sub requirements, which is considered as part of the same question. So under one question, you would have 2 or 3 sub questions. So you have to spend some time to identify all the requirements, because if you do not address all requirements, or if you do not understand or misunderstand the requirement, you end up giving a wrong answer. When you provide a wrong answer, you do not get any marks. Okay, so you are supposed to invest time to understand the requirement clearly. After understanding the requirement clearly, you are supposed to come up with an answer plan, or you are supposed to come up with an answer structure. So a maximum of 1/3 of your time can be allocated. So out of 60 minutes, 20 minutes should be allocated towards reading the requirement, understanding the requirement, and planning your answer. Okay, and when it comes to developing answer plans, plan the answer in the answer screen itself. I've seen some students, when developing their answer plans, they try to do it on the scratch pad. Don't do it, because when typing your fully fledged answer, you'd have to go back to the scratch pad to see what your answer plan is about. And in certain instances, due to students panicking, or when students try to type answers extremely fast, they might miss out on certain points which has been highlighted in the answer plan, which appears on the scratch pad. And you'd be wasting some time, because you'd be going back to the scratch pad, reading a certain point and trying to type your answer in paragraph format. So rather than developing your answer plan in a scratch pad, on the scratch pad, just do it on the answer screen itself. Why am I saying it? Because once you have the answer plan on the answer screen itself, when it comes to typing your answers, you can expand the points in the answer plan simply. Okay, so you are supposed to develop the answer plan on the answer screen itself. Once you have the answer plan, when it comes to typing your answer, simply expand the points in the answer plan. So if you adhere to this methodology, then you will not end up missing out on any points which you have highlighted in the answer plan. So you are ensuring that you are not wasting time unnecessarily. That's objective number 1. And objective number 2 is you are ensuring that all the points which you highlighted in the answer plan are covered when it comes to your fully fledged answer, when it comes to typing your fully fledged answer. So this is what you need to do when it comes to developing answers. You'd better understand these things when I'm discussing the mini mock, because I'll show you how to do these things in a practical manner. All right, then on top of that, you need to apply knowledge which you had gained from the pre-scene. So I'm going to highlight the right approach towards bringing in information from the pre-scene. So especially at the SCS level, since you are playing the role of a senior finance manager, you are supposed to have a good idea about, since you are reporting directly to the board members, since you are involved with strategic decision making or long-term decision making, you are supposed to have a good understanding about the industry as well as the company operations. So whenever you are providing answers, it's prudent to apply pre-scene information in your answers. Then you would end up getting additional marks. Okay, but there is a way in which you need to do this. You are not just supposed to bring in unnecessary information. If you are bringing in any information from the pre-scene, it needs to be totally relevant to the question at hand. Okay, so how are you supposed to do it? So first things first, when applying pre-scene information, it's prudent for you to know your key information. For example, Snakwheel manages their own data center. So likewise, you need to have a good understanding about the key information about the company. So how would you know which of the information is considered to be key and which of the information is considered to be not too necessary. Okay, just simply refer to our annotated pre-scene. Okay, so this is what an annotated pre-scene looks like. This is what we offer at TCS. Okay, so simply refer to our annotated pre-scene, and as you can see onto your right, I've made annotations, and these annotations highlight the most important points which you need to remember. So you need not, once you go through our annotated pre-scene, you need not remember all the nitty-gritties or all the information provided in the pre-scene, because we've made your life easier. We've highlighted the most important points which you need to remember. And on top of that, we have also highlighted the theoretical areas or syllabus content which can be tested based on the information provided in the pre-scene. As you can see here, I've highlighted syllabus areas, and on top of that, we also highlight, based on the hints provided by the examiner, the type of scenarios which can be tested at your real exam. So, just remembering these annotations will do when it comes to knowing your key information. Okay, so we have made your life easier. So if you decide on investing on paid content, then you would get your hands on the annotated pre-scene. Then you need to remember certain numbers as well. So ratio analysis, remember the key ratios. Okay, so again, we have made your life easier in here because you need not do any sums. We have summarized all the information. We have analyzed the SOPL, the SOFP, as well as the statement of changes in equity. As you can see, our all the information is precise and concise. We have summarized all the information, and we have conducted a ratio analysis as well. And all these ratios, profitability, activity, gearing, and liquidity, all these ratios have been summarized so that you can easily remember them. And we have carried out a financial analysis for Munch Bike, the closest competitor of Snakwheel as well. The same methodology has been adhered to. So you need to remember your numbers. So rather than for instance, if you want to talk about the gearing ratio in your answer, rather than, trying to work out the numbers at the exam, rather than wasting time, it's better if you can remember the ratios or we remember the numbers. So simply by going through our financial analysis slides, you would fulfill this requirement. Okay. So having done that, prepare for possible scenarios, but be open-minded. So by going through our 5 exam standard mocks, you can, predict or be ready for different types of scenarios or different types of questions which might be thrown at you. However, it's prudent for you to be open-minded because the CIMA examiner is trying to replicate a real-life work environment. So in a real-life work environment, you cannot predict the type of problems the company might face. You cannot predict the type of decision making you would be involved with, the type of recommendations you are supposed to make. So it's better to be open-minded, because then you are in a position to gain better marks. So you are not supposed to memorize any of the mocks or the answers. You are supposed to do the 5 mocks just to prepare yourself, just to figure out whether you have the ability to think properly and come up with appropriate answers. If your answers are not up to standard, then you can go through the suggested answers and figure out how to improve your answers, improve the quality of your answers. However, you are not supposed to memorize anything. Instead, you are supposed to go to the exam with an open mind, because if you have an open mind, you'd end up getting better marks at the real exam, especially since the SCS exam is a highly practical examination. Compared to OCS, OCS is highly technical. OCS is the hardest exam when you consider the 3 case studies, but SCS is on the other hand, at the other end of the spectrum. SCS is the most easiest because it's the most practical exam out of the 3. Okay, and remember, that the scenario presented in the exam carries the latest information. So in the pre-scene, the examiner gives you an indication about what has happened in the past within the organization. So the examiner gives you an indication about the industry dynamics, company operations, as well as the examiner provides the financial statements. So all these information talks about what has happened within the company in the past. However, when you walk into the exam, the scenarios presented carries the latest information. Okay, so you cannot predict the type of questions you would face at the real exam. So it's prudent to be open-minded at all times. So this is how you are supposed to apply knowledge which you bring in from the pre-scene. Okay, and how are you supposed to refer to pre-scene information in your answers? Refer or cite the pre-scene in such a way that it adds value to the point you are presenting in the answer. So whenever you are referring to the pre-scene, or whenever you are bringing in information from the pre-scene, try to figure out whether it adds value to your answer. Because just because you provide information which is taken from the pre-scene, you won't end up getting marks. Okay, simply when trying to bring in examples, or when trying to bring in information from the pre-scene, when planning your answer, think whether it adds value to your answer. If you feel that it does not add value to your answer, do not mention anything taken from the pre-scene. Okay, so that's the methodology which you need to adhere to when you are referring or citing to information brought in from the pre-scene. And do not force it in to show the marker that you have studied the pre-scene. Just because you provide hordes and hordes of information taken from the pre-scene, you won't end up getting marks unless otherwise the information which you have provided adds value to the answer which we have provided. Okay, so in order to understand how to do this properly, you can refer to the suggested answers of mock exams. Then you'd understand what type of information is brought in and how this information adds value to your final answer. Okay, so that's that. So having said that, let's move on to the last part of today's session, which is about discussing the mini mock and the suggested answer. So in here, I'll be showing to you guys about how to use the answer planning technique, as well as how to manage your time appropriately. So before we move on to that part, any questions, folks? Do you have any questions? If you have any questions, you can raise them now. Any questions? All right, since seems like there aren't any other questions, so I'm gonna move into the discussion of the mini mock. So I'm basing the discussion based on the mini mock which we have prepared for SCS. You can find this mini mock under the free content. Okay, and we have uploaded the suggested answer of the mini mock as well. So since we have already discussed the answer for section number 1 in the previous session, I'm going to discuss the answer for section number 2. Okay, which is a 60-minute task. Or typically in your examination you would see 60-minute tasks, because in OCS and MCS there were 4 tasks per exam. However, at the SCS level, you only have to provide answers for 3 tasks. So each task carries a time allocation of 60 minutes. Okay, so let's try to figure out what the question is about. So Peter Fordia, the CFO, hands over an excerpt of a document sent by the head of IT. So according to the head of IT, there has been a data breach at Snakwheel last night. So that's a major problem. Okay, and more information about it is provided under the reference material. So the data breach has occurred around 10 p.m. yesterday, and our customers, when trying to log into their accounts, have been redirected to a different page citing a data security requirement. So our customers, when they were trying to log into the Snakwheel platform, they were redirected to a different page citing a data security requirement. And the users had been then asked to relog into their accounts. When relogging into the accounts, personal information of customers had been gathered by hackers. Okay, why? Because when they are relogging in, these customers had input their user ID and password, and once you have the user ID and password, you can access the personal information, because you can simply access the personal accounts of each and every customer. So the type of information which these hackers has gained, or hackers had accessed, includes the name of customers, date of birth, address, phone number, email address, and credit card numbers. So this is a devastating scenario, because all types of personal information, even credit card numbers, had been accessed by hackers. Fortunately, the customer verification numbers, or the CVV, or the 3-digit validation code which appears on the back of your credit card, has not been accessed by the hacker, since Snakwheel is not holding on to this information. So according to GDPR regulation, companies are not supposed to hold on to the CVV, information pertaining to the customer verification number, or the CVV which is at the back of the credit card. Fortunately, Snakwheel does not hold any information or this type of information. If by any chance, if we held on to this information, hackers would have gotten their hands on credit card details. Then hackers can end up using the credit cards without the customers knowing about it. So this is a major issue. Although the CVV has not been accessed, information including the name of customers, date of birth, address, phone number, email address, and credit card numbers had been accessed. Okay, so that's the scenario. So the first step in developing your answer is understanding the scenario appropriately. So after reading the scenario, let's try to figure out what the requirements are. So requirement number 1, or subtask number 1, describe the type of actions we can take in response to the data breach. So we had faced a data breach. What type of action are we supposed to take? So that's the first part of subtask A. There is another part in the question, in the same question itself, and you are supposed to explain the strategic implications of these actions. So you are not simply supposed to describe the type of actions we are supposed to take in response to the data breach. When highlighting each and every action, you are supposed to highlight the strategic implications as well. So this question carries 2 parts. Number 1 is about highlighting the action to be taken with regards to the data breach, and on top of that, you are supposed to explain the strategic implications of each and every action which you recommend to take. All right, so the mark allocation for subtask A is 60%. So let's try to figure out how to develop an answer plan. Okay, so step 1 is determining the requirements or developing main headings. I said for each and every subtask, you need to come up with a main heading. Okay, so first things first, when you look at the first requirement, you are supposed to describe the type of actions you are supposed to take in response to the data breach and explain the strategic implications. So based on the question, I've come up with a main heading, strategic options, data breach. That's my main heading, and it's in bold and underlined format. So from the question itself, I've taken the main heading. So Alex was asking this question whether we can totally relate to the requirement or totally relate to the question when developing the main heading. Yes, indeed, that's exactly what I've done. So what are the strategic options which we need to take with regards to managing the data breach? And I've also mentioned the mark allocation. So for each task, you are allocated 50 marks. 50 into 3 tasks makes up 150. So for each task you are allocated 50 marks. Okay, so out of these 50 marks, 60% is the allocation for subtask A. So 50 into 60%, that comes up to 30 marks. So what you need to remember is, when developing answer points for the first part or the first subtask, you need to have something like 10 to 15 valid points, 2 marks each, 2 or 3 marks each per valid point. So it's better to come up with 10 to 15 valid points. Then you would get 30 marks. So that's what you need to remember. So first things first, you read the requirement, then you come up with the main heading. After you have developed the main heading, you need to understand how many marks are allocated. So 30 marks are allocated. So you need to come up with 10 to 15 answer points. Okay, so once you know what you're supposed to do, step number 2 is coming up with or developing an answer plan. So you need to allocate 15 to 20 minutes towards developing your answer plan. So as I told you earlier, after reading the question and after understanding the requirement, you are not supposed to start typing fully fledged answers straight away. Instead, spend some time to think and structure your answer appropriately. Because when you are working in a corporate environment, if your finance director or your CFO asks you a question, you would spend some time to come up with an answer. After structurizing it properly, then you'd type it as an email and you'd respond to the CFO. So the same methodology needs to be adhered to when developing answers at the SCS exam. So the heading is here, strategic options data breach, and I've used bullet points to come up with the answer structure. So I'm trying to keep it concise as much as possible, because the objective is not to write or type fully fledged answers. The objective is just to come up with an answer summary or an answer structure, or in other terms, an answer plan. So what's the first strategic option which the company can adhere to? They can go for a do nothing strategy. So a do nothing strategy means that you do not inform customers about the data breach. Okay, so that's the first option at your disposal. And as per the question, you are supposed to explain the strategic implication of each and every action. So what are the strategic implications of adopting a do nothing strategy? If we do not inform our customers, we can avoid unnecessary controversies. So this data breach has occurred last night. I don't know whether we have all the necessary information about the data breach as said. So in such a context, rather than going to town with that information, it's prudent for us to wait until we gather all the necessary information. So rather than informing customers right now, by doing nothing at the moment, we are avoiding unnecessary controversies, because we ourselves are not too conversant about what has happened last night. We have limited information because it's so this data breach which happened just last night. So we might take some more time to gather all the necessary information. And although we are not informing our customers, instead we can inform major credit card companies, because customers' cards or credit cards have been accessed, details pertaining to customer credit cards has been accessed. So if we inform the major credit card companies, that's a proactive approach which we are taking. Okay, and since we are not informing customers, instead informing the credit card companies or the banks, it minimizes the public exposure, because these banks or the credit card companies are not gonna go to town with this information. They can't. They are restricted by law, where they cannot share information about a data breach which has happened within Snakwheel. Okay, and however, you also need to remember that we cannot share identities of hacked user accounts with third parties. So we can simply inform the banks about the data breach. However, we cannot share personal information or the names or email addresses or whatnot about the affected customers according to data protection laws. Okay, so these are the strategic implications of doing nothing. So I've highlighted the positives which we are achieving by doing nothing, as well as the negatives. So that's how you're supposed to build an argument. So that's the first option at your disposal. The second option is to suspend all services until the investigation concludes. So we are conducting an investigation at the moment. So until the investigation concludes or comes to an end, we can suspend all services offered by Snakwheel. So if we do that, what are the strategic implications? We are taking steps to prevent further data breaches, because we are not too sure about what has happened at the moment. We have limited information, and if we do not stop our operations right now, we run the risk of further data breaches in the future. So in order to prevent that, we can suspend all services or activities within Snakwheel at the moment. And once we do this, we would have enough time to upgrade our defense mechanisms. We can upgrade our data protection software and whatnot. We can take different types of action to protect our data as well as our customers. And once we do something like this, the users will be impressed, because then users will know or get an impression that Snakwheel is not running after profits. Instead, Snakwheel is ready to even stop their operations, because they think about their customers in a larger sense. They are not only focused on making profits. Instead, they give a priority about data security pertaining to customers. So that's the second option at our disposal. So I've highlighted, if we take this step, what type of strategic implications we have to face. And the third strategic option is to make a public admission of the issue. So our first option was not to inform customers. Our third option is to inform the customers, or publicly, publicly inform the stakeholders, our stakeholders, about this issue which had taken place. So if we are going for a public admission, then the company's directors are supposed to issue a full press release, and the company's directors need to post on social media as well. This is an immediate response. Okay, and because of that, this helps maintain reputation. This shows that we had admitted about a mistake which has occurred within Snakwheel. Okay, so that's good for reputation. And this, if we take this step, we are warning our customers to be suspicious of abnormal requests in the future, because according to the question, our customers were supposed to relog into their accounts, and in that process they were redirected to a different page citing a data security requirement. Something like this has not happened before. So we are warning our customers about suspicious or to be suspicious of abnormal requests or activities when using the Snakwheel platform in the future. So for that option, with regards to making a public admission, I've highlighted the strategic implications. So as you can see, I've taken 3 options, thinking that each option would carry 10 marks. And under each option, I've come up with bullet points. And for each bullet point, ideally 2 marks will be allocated. Okay, so there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 points. 12 into 2 points is something like 24. So 24 plus for each and every option which we have highlighted, you can get something like 2 marks. So 2 into 3 is 6. So 24 plus 6 makes up 30 marks. So that's how we are supposed to develop your answer plan. So once you have this answer plan, what you are supposed to do is, you are supposed to, step number 3 is expand the answer plan, where you are supposed to simply type the answer. So you have thought this through, you have developed an answer plan, you have spent some time to think when developing the answer plan. And once you have a plan in place, when it comes to typing your answers, you need not think too much. It's simply about expanding these answer points. So for each of these strategic options, you can come up with, if you want, you can come up with a subheading. Okay, so the first subheading is do nothing, not informing customers. Second subheading is about suspending all services. Third subheading is about making a public admission, right? So likewise, you develop your answer plan. So you are supposed to take 15 to 20 minutes per task to develop answer plan. So that's the answer plan for the first part. So let's look at the second requirement. The second subtask, you are supposed to recommend the objectives that the board should set for the head of IT of Snakwheel within the first 48 hours of the breach. So what type of objectives are we supposed to set when it comes to controlling our head of IT? So in order to make sure that the head of IT is headed in the correct direction, we have to set objectives which this head of IT needs to adhere to. So you are supposed to recommend these objectives which we can use to control our head of IT. So I've come up with a heading again, objectives, head of IT. So in here, the mark allocation has been provided 20 marks. So all in all, you need to have something like 7 to 10 valid points. Okay, 7 to 10 valid points in your answer plan. So let's look at the answer plan. So first things first, the head of IT should reach a tentative conclusion because this data breach, as you already know, has happened last night. So, you know, we need to come up with a tentative conclusion as at now. Okay, so that's the first objective which we need to set. Okay, so this tentative conclusion gives us an indication about the cause of the data breach, which triggers corrective action. So once we had finalized the cause, all the causes which had led to this data breach, for each and every cause, we can determine corrective action. Okay, so by identifying the tentative reasons or the tentative conclusion for all the data breach, it triggers corrective action. And the board should highlight what it prefers. So for certain problems, the head of IT might have tentative answers. For certain problems, the head of IT might not have any answers. Okay, because you know we are fresh out of the problem because of a lack of information. The head of IT might not have any responses. So the board needs to determine what type of questions the board would prefer a response, a no response, and for what type of questions a board prefers at least a tentative response. Okay, so we need to stipulate these things when determining objectives for which affects the head of IT. And the board should determine how long IT will take to identify the affected customers. So not the board actually, the head of IT should determine how long the IT department will take to identify affected customers. So the head of IT should inform the board about, you know, the time frame needed to identify all affected customers, because we need to make sure that we identify all affected customers and, you know, communicate with them and try to figure out how we can help these customers out. Okay, so these are the things. First objective is this, head of IT reaching a tentative conclusion. And when taking this step, we need to make sure that these areas are covered. Okay, and on top of that, we have to set deadlines with regards to how long it takes to publish available facts. So for data gathering, we need to, so I said previously that for data gathering, we need to set deadlines. And on top of that, we have to set deadlines with regards to how long the company is planning to take to publish available facts. Faster the better. We can't take forever. So that's exactly why we are setting a deadline, so that the head of IT needs to adhere to it. And on top of that, another objective is to make sure that the head of IT prepares a report based on the findings, because the head of IT is not just supposed to verbally communicate the findings. Instead, it needs to be in report format. Why? Then we are engaged with formal communication. Once all the information is there in a report format, you can't amend the information easily. And on top of that, in the future, you can use the same report and identify what the company did in the past, what the company had done in the past when faced with a data breach. And this report should be backed with evidence to trigger criminal prosecution on perpetrators. So if we find out who these hackers are, then the findings of this report can be used for criminal prosecution as well. So when developing the report, the head of IT should bear that in mind as well. Okay. And at the very end, the head of IT should develop a plan to prevent a recurrence. So this problem should not occur once more. So to prevent a recurrence, the IT head should come up with a plan. So the quality of the plan should be checked independently. So after the IT head comes up with a plan to prevent a recurrence, we need to see whether this plan makes sense or not, whether this plan is up to the required level of quality. So it's better to get it checked through IT experts or external consultants before we finalize a prevention plan. And this plan should be cost effective. So if we are spending millions and millions of dollars, but the return which we are gaining is lesser than that, then that plan makes no sense. So we have to make sure that this prevention plan should be cost effective, and the IT head should be held responsible for the plan. So when it comes to developing the plan, certain parts can be delegated to subordinates. That's pretty normal. However, the ultimate responsibility towards the credibility of the plan should be with the head of IT. So ultimately, the head of IT should be held responsible towards the plan which he is preparing. Okay, so that's the answer for the second requirement. So as you can see, again, I've used a lot of bullet points. I've summarized the entire answer rather than writing paragraphs and paragraphs of answers. I've just mentioned answers in just 4 to 5 words. Okay, 4 to 5 worded bullet points. And once you have a structure like this, you can rethink about the quality of your answer. You can delete certain parts if you feel that it is not necessary, and you can add certain parts. You can revisit the requirement and see whether you had addressed the needs. You are supposed to recommend the objectives that the board should set for the head of IT for Snakwheel within the first 48 hours of the breach. Yes, I think I've covered all the areas. Okay, so once you have an answer plan in place, step number 3, as I highlighted earlier, is to expand the answer plan. So when it comes to expanding the answer plan, I asked you guys not to develop the answer plan on the scratch pad, because once you are trying to bring in information, or once you are typing your fully fledged answer, you might miss certain points. In order to avoid that, simply come up with the answer plan on the answer screen itself. Then when it comes to expanding each point, you are taking all action where you are not missing out on any of the points which you have made. So the mark allocation for this second subtask is 20 marks. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plus the main points, 8, 9, 10, 11. So altogether we have something like 11 points. 11 into 2 comes up to something like 22. So we have come up with an appropriate answer structure. We have 11 valid points. 11 into 2, you will gain 22 marks. So somewhere around 20 marks. And once you have the answer plan, it's a matter of expanding the answer plan. For each and every answer point, you have to come up with a paragraph, and every paragraph needs to have 2 to 4 lined sentences. So that's exactly what you can see here. I've come up with a main heading for the first subtask, which is in bold and underline format, and all the points which I've mentioned, I've provided answers in paragraphs. That's exactly what you can see here. For each and every answer point, I've developed a paragraph. Then I'm moving on to the second subtask. Again, for the second subtask, I've come up with a main heading, which is in bold and underline format. And for each and every point, I've come up with a paragraph each. Okay, so that's exactly what you can see in here. All right, so that's the answer. That's the question as well as the answer for the mini mock, and that's exactly what you are supposed to adhere to when developing your own answer plans. Okay, so as additional reference, you can refer to the following video, which is uploaded on our website as well as on our YouTube channel. So in this video, which was done for the session in May, I've discussed the answer plan for the first task or section number 1. So section number 2's answer was highlighted in this webinar. So go through this recorded version of the previous webinar, which was done for May. So SCS webinar 3 answering technique. Check from 29 minutes and 15 seconds to 53 minutes and 40 seconds. That's where I'm discussing the answer plan for section number 1. All right. Okay, so having said that, let me talk about the type of services which we are offering. So we are offering 2 main packages. The first package is known as the Essential Pack. So if you purchase the Essential Pack, you would have access to the full pre-scene analysis videos. There are 4 videos in total. So you would have access to all these videos, and on top of that, you would have access to the annotated pre-scene as well. So by going through the annotated pre-scene and going through the 4 videos, you would have all the necessary information about the pre-scene, and you would understand what type of information is considered to be extremely important, and you are simply supposed to remember these important points. So we have made your life easier via these full pre-scene analysis videos and the annotated pre-scene. And also, in order to get a good understanding about the industry, you can refer to the industry analysis slides. So you'd get your hands on our industry analysis slides, where we have provided an overview of the industry, the competitive landscape. We have highlighted the industry trends, and we have provided real life examples so that you can better understand the industry dynamics. So that's the type of these are the type of information which you'd get your hands on if you invest on a paid package. Okay, and you'd get your hands on financial analysis slides. I showed you the displayed the financial analysis slides previously, and you'd get your hands on top 20 likely issues as well, where we are highlighting the probable scenarios which can be tested in the real exam. And you'd get your hands on the SCS familiarization kit, where we have highlighted the technical nitty-gritties pertaining to the SCS exam. And the most important service which you get your hands on are the 5 exam standard mock exams with suggested answers. So these 5 exam standard mock exams, we had developed them to make sure that we cover all syllabus areas pertaining to E3, F3, and P3. Okay, so all syllabus content, all syllabus areas are covered in these questions, mocks and suggested answers. And by going through the suggested answers, you can figure out what type of answers, the quality of answers you are supposed to provide. And you would have access to the WhatsApp discussion forum, where you can raise your concerns. I'm part of that WhatsApp discussion forum. We are always ready to help you guys out. So if you have any question pertaining to any syllabus content or the pre-scene, then or any of the mock exams, you can raise these concerns on the group, and I'm more than happy to help you guys out. And the Essential Pack comes with a pass guarantee. If by any chance you end up failing the exam after using one of our packages, you will have access to the subsequent sitting or the material pertaining to the subsequent sitting free of charge. That's the pass guarantee which we are providing. So the investment is £99. Then looking at the value pack, you would get your hands on everything which I discussed under the essential pack. On top of that, you would have access to the online mock exam platform. So we have created a mock exam platform which is akin to the Pearson VUE system you'd see at the real exam. So you can attempt all 5 mock exams under real exam conditions or under simulated exam conditions. So this is going to be extremely beneficial for you at the real exam, because the type of platform and you are accustomed with real life exam conditions. Okay, so that's that. And we are providing professional marking and feedback on 3 mocks. So for mocks 2, 3 and for mocks 3, 4 and 5, you will be getting personalized tutor feedback, and this is the type of personalized tutor feedback you would be getting. So you can see the type of feedback which we have provided. So for each and every paragraph, you'd get feedback, in-depth feedback, and at the very end, you'd get mark breakdowns as well, so that you are in a position to figure out how you had fared looking at each and every subtask. And at the very end, we provide general comments as well. Okay, so that's the type of personalized feedback which you get, which helps you immensely when improving the quality of your answers. And you'd get your hands on the theory recap slides pertaining to E3, F3, and P3. These theory recaps are concise and downloadable. So you can simply go through these slides and polish up your knowledge pertaining to E3, F3, and P3 related syllabus content. So the investment is £199. So you might be wondering whether to invest on an essential pack or a value pack. So if you had aced your OTQ exams, and if you are comfortable with self-studies, please go ahead with the essential pack, because then you can work on your own, because you have all the necessary material at your disposal and the mock exams. Then since you're comfortable with self-study, you can work on your own and ace the SCS exam. However, if you're coming through the exemption route, you have to go for the value pack, because you need all the personalized support you need. And on top of that, since you are coming through the exemption route, such as the FLP route, you have not done the OTQ exams. So you need to be conversant with the syllabus content. So it's prudent for you to go for the value pack. And on top of that, if you are returning to CIMA studies after prolonged study break, or if you struggled with your OTQ examinations, or if you had failed your SCS exam before, then it's again prudent for you to go for the value pack, because you need all the personalized support to pass the exam comfortably. Okay, so that's that. These are the type of services which we offer. Before we conclude tonight's session, any questions, guys? Any questions about the answer planning technique and time management technique? All right, so seems like there aren't any questions. So let me take you to our website before we conclude the session. So as you can see, I'm on the SCS page. So once you go to the SCS page, it says in here, click here to access free content. So the recorded versions of all 3 webinars can be accessed via your user account. And you are supposed to simply create your own user account and access the free content. And on top of that, you would have access to one of the pre-scene analysis videos. I said that you would get your hands on 4 pre-scene analysis videos if you invest on paid content. So you would, under the free content, you would have access to one of the videos. And on top of that, you will have access to the mini mock and the suggested answer under the free content. Okay, and our pass rate has been 100% so far. So I hope it would be the same when we get the results next week as well. So you can purchase the essential pack in here. as well as the value pack within the website itself. And if you want to invest on our products, before you purchase our products, I would advise you to go through the FAQ section, because under the FAQ section, we have given samples of all the type of material you would get your hands on under each package. So check out the samples to see the quality of services which we are offering before you make the purchase. All right, and you can purchase any of these products on the website itself using your credit or debit cards. Okay, so having said that, you can contact us on our website or simply email us or drop us a message on our WhatsApp. Then I urge you guys to follow us on our social media pages. There's a Facebook group especially developed for SCS. And on top of that, the recorded versions of all these sessions are uploaded on YouTube. And go to our website and check out our blog posts, because we have highlighted best practices with regards to passing the case study exams, and we have also highlighted what you need to avoid when preparing yourself for the SCS exam or any CIMA case study exam. So all the best practices, the exam dates, how much the exams are going to cost you, all these type of technical information appears under our blog posts. Okay, so having said that, it brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining in, and I hope to see you guys next week on Saturday, where I'm doing the third webinar, exam prep, and I'll be highlighting what you need to do to develop confidence and maintain the same level of confidence at the real exam. And since the results will be out on Thursday or Friday, I will be talking about, if you had failed your SCS exam, I'll be talking about what you need to do to bounce back from failure. And I'll be highlighting common mistakes which students commit. And by understanding these mistakes, hopefully you would avoid them when you are sitting for your SCS exam in August. So thank you very much for joining in. I hope to see you guys next week at the third webinar. Thanks again and good night.